When it comes to communication in your small business or your nonprofit, there's probably no more crucial type of communication than training. When you need to be able to convey concepts to your team, your staff members, your employees about how to perform their job functions. But how can you tell whether or not you're actually making an impact with that training? Well, today I'd like to show you an easy and effective way to know by utilizing Microsoft Forms. Hi there, I'm Mark from Valor Excel. Thank you so much for joining me. A few weeks ago, we did an installment on how to create a survey in Microsoft Forms. And if you haven't seen it, I suggest you click on the link in the description below this video. It will give you background on navigating through Microsoft Forms. I'm not going to provide all of that same background today, because today I want to take the concepts we taught before and just put them in a slightly different light as we look at the specifics of utilizing forms for setting up quizzes. Now, the surveys that we created a few weeks ago are a great information gathering tool. Primarily, I was intending them as something that you would use for the people who are on the receiving end of your services. You can also utilize surveys with your staff to get their opinion on things that will give you a good picture of what your work climate is like. But when you want to make sure that people really followed, understood, and can put into practice the concepts of a training, that's where a quiz can be really beneficial. So without any further introduction, let's take a look at setting up a quiz in Microsoft Forms. To start creating a quiz in Microsoft Forms, you can go ahead into Microsoft 365 and in your Apps Launcher, select Forms. It will display whatever your most recent ones are. And we'll come up here and instead of clicking on New Form, click on the drop-down arrow and we'll select New Quiz. Now, if you do watch the video that I did on creating a survey in Forms, a lot of this will look similar. But again, the primary difference between a survey and a quiz is that a survey is basically just general information gathering. With a quiz, we're asking specific questions and we're looking for specific answers. And as we move forward with this, you'll see how a quiz deviates from a survey just with some of the options that are available to us. So the first thing that we can do with our basic template here is, if we'd like, you can come up and click on Theme, and you have the ability to add either a solid color background or a stylized image. And for this one, let's go ahead and actually we'll select this. And now we have a background. And from this point, we can go through and do any other customization that we would like. This is where we would add the title for the quiz. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll call it the new test quiz. There's a form description, and in this area, one of the things that you could do in addition to describing what the quiz is about is that you could embed a URL for a training video, let's say. It would direct the person to click on the link. They would go out, access the video, watch it, and then return here to take a quiz to determine whether or not they understood the material that they watched. Something else that you can do here is you can embed an image. And let me go ahead and upload, I'll just pick a Valor Excel logo. There we go. And now if we come up here and click on Preview, there, that looks great. We have our logo and the name of our quiz and also our theme. And we'll click on Back. So from this point, it's basically going through and adding each set of questions. And to do that, we'll click on Add New. Now again, this is very, very similar to what you would have in Forms if you were creating a survey. And in addition to these options, if you click on the drop-down arrow, you also have these. Now, I think when you're creating a quiz, the two choices that you'll primarily use are choice and text. I think that choice is probably the most common. That will cover multiple choice questions, which could either be asking something and then providing a variety of answers, or you could also utilize choice for true-false statements, where you simply make a statement and then you have the option of selecting true or false. If you select text, and we will look at that a little bit later on, That's really ideally suited for situations where you want to basically ask an essay question, and your goal is to determine how well the person grasped a particular piece of information. In a situation like that, you may ask something and then give them credit based on how well they answered. That gets to be a little bit more nuanced, and we'll check that out later on. But for the first one here, let's go with choice, and it will default to providing you with two options. And you can add as many additional options as you would like. But up here is where we would actually go ahead and key a question in. So for this first one, let's do this as a true and false. And we'll start off by making a statement here. All right, so we said the contract department also makes calls to clients. And we can say true. And down here, false. Now, the first thing I wanted to show you is you'll notice that beside each of these responses, there is a check mark. And if I click, now we see that beside true, it's solid green with a check mark, and now we have an X beside false. If I click here, we have the inverse. This is how you establish what the correct answer is to whatever question you've asked, or in this case with a true or false, which is the correct selection. And you can toggle back and forth to pick whichever one you would like. For this, we'll go ahead and keep it at true. If you wanted to remove one of your responses, you can click on delete. You can also add a message if someone chooses that. You could bring up a comment that either gives them additional information or makes note of the fact that they got it correct, however you wanted to do that. And again, you could add additional options if you wanted to. Now, the next thing I wanted to show you down here is points. Now, if your goal is to make sure that the person understood the material that they watched, using points is a great way to do that because forms will automatically tabulate how many correct answers the person provides, and it will also then give you a score of how well they did on the quiz by totaling up the points. Now, we're not going to create 10 questions here, but let's pretend like we are. We'll say that we were going to do a quiz of 10 questions. So if we made each one 10 points, then if you got them all correct, that would be an even 100. You can basically do this however you would like. This will default to multiple answers being turned off. If you had a scenario where you asked a question and said something like, check all that apply, you could set that so that multiple answers were accepted. But generally, you'll probably want to keep that off. Now also, required defaulted here to being off. I think with a quiz, it's a good idea to not let the person completing the quiz advance until they answer whatever you have just asked. So we can go ahead and set that for required. And now, as we add additional questions, they also will default to required unless for whatever reason we manually deselected them. Now, the only situation where you may not want to require that they answer is if you had a question that was something like a calendar, where you're asking them, what day did you watch the training? It might not really be critical for them understanding the material. It's more just you gathering information. So you could make that optional. You could also make it optional if you had a situation where you were asking their opinion on a scale of 1 to 10, rate how clear the material was, something like that. All right, so now we'll come down here and let's add another one. And for this one, let's go ahead and again click on choice. And I'd like to make this a multiple choice where there are various things they can select from. So let's add 2 more options on here, and then we'll actually ask a question. So we'll say, when does the contract department send out invoices? It has actually given us options here. We could select these if we wanted to. I'm going to just go ahead. We'll just keep these for the time being at options 1, 2, 3, and 4, and just pretend that we had a specific response there. So in this scenario, again, we would have to determine what is the correct response. So let's make it option 2. And now Forms has defaulted the other 3 to an X. So we know 2 is the correct answer. Again, it's defaulting to applying 10 points because for the first question, that's what we did. So we'll keep that the same. We'll say yes, 10 possible points. We're not going to allow multiple answers. Number 2 is the only correct answer. And again, this is defaulting to required. Now, I'll show you something else that you can do here. If you click on this ellipsis, you have a couple of other options here. One of the ones that I wanted to look at is shuffle options. So if we click on shuffle options, right now, these are listed as option 1, 2, 3, and 4. If we come up here and click on preview, now you'll notice it listed them in reverse order, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go back. We'll go into preview again, and now they're listed as 1, 3, 4, 2. What's nice about doing that is that it's just one more safeguard to try to prevent people from cheating. Because just because a particular answer is number 2 for you doesn't mean the person across the aisle has the same number 2. It could be number 4 for them. Now, let's go ahead and add new. And for this last one here, I'd like to show you text. Again, this is something where you might be asking a question. So we'll say, describe the steps in finalizing a contract. And again, this will basically be a text answer. Now, we're going to go ahead and say that it's worth 10 points here. I want to go ahead and with this, we're going to set this for long answer. That will give the maximum amount of character spaces for the person to reply. Again, we're keeping this as a required question, but I'll show you in a minute how this would actually work out. Now, we could just continue to do this, going the rest of the way through, creating new questions, but for the time being, we'll just go with that. We're asking 3 questions. If you get them all correct, it's a total of 30 possible points. So if you want to see how that would play out, you can come up here and click on preview. And now this is what the person completing the quiz would see. Now, I also wanted to show you, if you come up here and click on the ellipsis, you have some more options under settings. This is defaulting to show results automatically so that after the person submits the quiz, they'll be able to see their results and how many answers they got correct. This is also defaulting to only people in my organization can respond. You could change this to anyone can respond, but if this is an internal quiz that you're doing to make sure that your staff understood something in a training, this would probably be the best option. You can also set it where it will record the name of the person completing it, and it will default to only allowing a person to have one response to the quiz. Now, what you can also do down here is click on Shuffle Questions. And now, if we go back out, let's go into Preview. So right now, the true and false is the first, the multiple choice is the second, and the open text is the third. If we go under Preview, now we see multiple choice is first, open text is second, and true and false is third. Another safeguard to prevent people from cheating, because the person beside them may have the questions in completely different order. What we can do now is we'll go ahead and complete this. So for the first one here, let's go ahead and select option 2. Describe the steps in finalizing a contract. We could basically put in whatever we wanted to here, pretend that this is text describing whatever. And then down here, the contract department also makes calls to clients, and we'll say that that's true. Now at this point, we can click on Submit, and now it says you can view some results so far. Your final score will be ready after grading is completed. But we can view the results, so we can see that one was correct. We got 10 out of 10 points. On this one, it says will be reviewed. And on this one, it was correct. We got 10 out of 10 points. Now, if you come back here to our administrator page, you'll see it's showing that we've had one response so far. We can click and go into that. And this will be a cumulative display for each question. It will show you a graphical representation as well as a numeric one of how many people responded a certain way to each one of the questions. And we can also here click on Post Scores. And now you'll see that for the one we just did, it's ungraded, meaning that it's not in a completed status yet. So if we click on Ungraded, it will take us into the form. And again, Forms by itself auto-graded the ones where it was simply a matter of selecting the correct response. But this one is one where we need to actually review it. We asked a question here, and the person would have to write an answer. So what might play out here is that you may say, if they address 5 separate items in their answer, they can get 2 points for each one of those items, a total of 10 possible points. Well, let's say that this person got 4 of them. So basically, there was 1 point they didn't reference that they should have, but they did reference 4 of them. They're getting 2 points for each. So if we click on Score, we can increment and we'll give them 8. So it's registering as an incorrect response because they didn't touch on all 5 of them. They only got 4, but they are getting 8 points. And so now, if we go back, it's showing as graded, and we can see that out of 30 possible points, they got 28, so that was a 93%. And now if we go back to the Responses tab, you'll see that there's also an option here to open in Excel. So if we click here, we can actually open this up in an Excel spreadsheet, and it's essentially transferring the responses from each one of the questions into corresponding rows. You could also take this information and paste it into a spreadsheet of your own if you wanted to do some sort of further data manipulation. And the last thing I wanted to show you here is if we come up under Collect Responses, this is also where we can send a link for this out to others in the organization. Right now, this is set as Send and Collect Responses. Only people in my organization can respond. If we click on Copy, it will copy the link, which we can then paste into an email and send it out to whoever we would like to complete the quiz. And if you click up here on the ellipsis, there's also an option that says Collaborate or Duplicate. So here you have the ability to get a link, which you could send to other people on your team, giving them the ability to make modifications to the quiz. It might be other people that are working with you to test the people learning the material. And you can also share this as a template that someone else could take and modify into an entirely new quiz themselves. So those are the primary steps involved in setting up a quiz in Microsoft Forms. As you can see, Microsoft Forms is a really beneficial tool for constructing quizzes that you can integrate into a variety of training scenarios. It can really help you to understand whether or not the trainings that you've established are effectual or need to be tweaked a little bit. But how do you know whether or not the rest of your organization is functioning the way it should? Well, I'd like to offer you a free resource that you can get by simply clicking on the link in the description below this video. It's a PDF called Taking Your Organization's Temperature. If you go through it, it will really be an eye-opener because it challenges you to take a look at the philosophy behind how you're approaching things in your organization, whether it be a small business or a nonprofit. It consists of 30 statements about the health of your organization, and your responses will really give you a clear indication of whether or not you're on the right track. If this was beneficial to you, would you please benefit us by giving this video a like? And in the comments below, let me know what challenges you face when you're trying to train your staff and employees. Also, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. We have new content every week, specifically tailored for small businesses and nonprofits. I thank you so much for joining me today, and I invite you to come back for the next installment. Until then, remember this, at Valor XL, we're committed to helping you do smart work. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.